There's Colin.
Hang on. Who else have we got? Oh, we've got Adrian and we've got Lennart. If I can find out which language Lennart is a native speaker of, I think it's Norway from memory, then I might just make sure I use that as one of my languages, that's all. Adrian, I've got Google Translate to add
English.
Croydonish.
Maybe we can do a quick poll, Colin, at the beginning.
Maria said, she said something about doing it for polls, and we don't have any polls.
We might, you don't know.
Well, as yet.
A survey. Yeah, we could.
Oh, right, Colin, stop ruining all my fun.
I know. we might have Alexander Wojtas, who is Polish.
Right.
I'm going to apologise to the Americans in advance. I can't get Google Translate to speak in US English because I haven't got that voice installed, because I've got UK English installed. So you'll have to put up with us Brits in terms of our accents.
Right. It's all right. Easier to understand than something like French or German, that's for sure.
Oh, I'm definitely going to do French and German and a few other more obscure languages.
Since today's presentation is going to be about translation, Colin would like you to put in the chat what your native language is, if it's anything other than English, or what you currently speak. So whether it's your native language or not. Maybe different languages that you know how to speak. He wants to kind of demo a variety of languages that our audience has some experience with. So today we have Colin Riddington. He runs Mendip Data Systems and also isladogs.
Well done.
Yeah. He is a recent Microsoft MVP, and I don't know that I need to say anything else about you specifically. You're welcome to say more than that, Colin, but you're going to talk today on translation tools using Access. So please carry on.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for inviting me to be here. Today, I'm going to talk to you about two different translation tools that I've developed in Access over the last 18 months or so. One of them I demonstrated briefly at DevCon last year. That's the first one I'm going to do, the Translate and Speak app. And the reason I'm doing this is it's a follow-on from a session that David Neely and Alessandro Grimaldi did back in, I believe, September, using speech tools in Access. And in the second half of the session, I'm going to show you my new application translator, which will be released next month. First one here then demonstrates the use of both Google Translate and text-to-speech in Access, something that you saw back in September. I've just taken it a stage further. And as you probably know, text can be entered in and translated to any of the supported languages. At the moment, there are 109 of those supported by Google Translate. There is a limit, when you do this through code as I am, there's a limit of about 9,800 characters, which is actually about double the limit you get when you go straight onto their website to use the Translate tool. There, the limit is 5,000. For some reason with code, it's almost double that. In addition, then, I'm going to show you how you can use any installed voice to speak the text. And there are, in Windows 10, available 35 different languages if you install them all. However, having said that, you'll find out when you first actually do this that not all of them are initially active. I found, having installed all 35, only 14 or so were, and there's a registry fix that I'll explain later needed to activate all of the voices. Where there isn't a dedicated voice for a particular language, then an alternative voice is offered where there is something reasonable as an alternative. If there is nothing reasonable, then no text-to-speech is possible. The first screen that you will see shortly then comes up in English initially, but you can then translate that into any of the other 108 languages. And if you wish to, you can save it in that language for future use. The translate form, then, if it's in English, okay, it will look like this. And then it's been designed to mimic the Google Translate website then. So you've got a from language, you type some text in, and a to language that you select. You can swap the left and right panes there. And the addition is then we can speak the text in either language in an appropriate voice. And I will show you more about that next. Before we do then, one last form with this, and that is where we set up the text to speech. And this will actually determine how many voices you actually want to have spoken during the course of using the program. And it's time that we actually looked at it. So I've opened this directly to the main form. It tells you something about what it does here. I've already explained that. And you can choose, if you wish to hide this in future and just go to the main form that you use for translation. But before I do then, let me just show you translation of this into Arabic. That just says translating to Arabic, please wait. And there you go. It's translated all of the words that it recognizes. It doesn't recognize certain things like mended data systems or, surprisingly, access and so on. I could save that, but I'm not going to do so. Let me change that to a different language, such as Bulgarian will do. Etc. And I'll do Swedish just because it was mentioned earlier. Hopefully that says translating to Swedish, please wait. Oh, Swahili, I chose the wrong one. Sorry, Swedish. Etc. Now, because I'm not saving this, if I now close that and go back to that main form there, oops, open the same one again, it's back in English again here. So now on the second form here, and I can type text into here, but it'll be slightly quicker if I actually just copy and paste some text I've had earlier. So having got this, now we can speak this in what's supposedly a natural UK or English British voice.
Hello, Access Lunchtime. It's good to be here.
Can I
Glad
double
you
check?
could make
Can
it as
everyone hear
well.
that as well? Maria?
Yes, I could.
You could. Excellent. Right. Let's translate that to e.g. French. And you'll notice French is slightly more verbose, which is actually something useful to remember for later on.
Bonjour Accès-Midi. C'est bon d'être ici.
I can stop it
Content
midway
que
through
tu
to
aies pu le
speed
faire.
things up a bit as well. You'll notice it was a different voice, okay, for that one. And if we go into Swedish.
Hej Access lunchtid. Det är bra att vara här. Kul att du klarade
And
det
it will
också.
also translate many of the non-Latin script languages. Sorry, not translate, speak them as well here, Arabic.
مرحبا الوصول إلى وقت الغداء.
I had a
من
choice of
الجيد أن
Saudi
أكون هنا.
Arabic or Egyptian Arabic. I chose Saudi. You can only have one for each of these languages, unfortunately. It's one of the defaults of this here. I can also change the speed of this. Change it to something ridiculous like 10.
مرحبا الوصول إلى وقت الغداء. من الجيد أن
And that
أكون
makes it
هنا.
much
سأنظر
more
إلى التنبيه وأن
understandable
تفعلها
to
كذلك.
me. Not. And I'll leave it at 1 from now on. I can also change the volume. You can see on the top left there, the volume meter is going up and down. I could also mute it, but that seems pretty pointless here. I can swap the sides over. I can also translate them from Arabic into another language, then into a different language, and yet another one. And now let's try change it back into English and see how close it is. And it's changed it quite a lot there, right? And that's one of the ways that you can test the accuracy of Google Translate is do multiple translations. For that reason, normally I would only do translation from your default language to one other one. Always start from that. And let's just change the sentence here and show you it can cope with quote marks. And let's change that to Bulgarian.
Jak tu pisze William Shakespeare,
Okay, etc., etc. Now, I said earlier that it can cope with anything up to about 9,800 characters. And to show you what the problem with this is, then I'm just going to paste in a very long bit of text, which I've deliberately made to be just slightly under 9,800 there. And if I change that now to Chinese, I'll use simplified Chinese. You'll notice how much more concise a language Chinese is, only about a third of the length. Whereas if we change it to French, they waffle on a bit, and 11,592 characters. Now it's translated into that all right, but if I now try and translate from that into, let's say, Danish, it hits the limit, it won't do it. So therefore, you can translate into a language and go over the limit, but you can't translate from it, okay? So that's one thing you need to actually ensure that you limit yourself to. Okay, so I think I've shown you just about all I want to on this screen here. Here's the text-to-speech settings then. Now, when you first install Windows, you will probably only have one voice installed, and that will be US English or UK English, whatever your default is. You probably won't have any other languages by default. I installed loads of additional languages, and to do that, you go into Windows Settings, Time and Language, Speech, and then you can see my long list of voices that I've got here. There's just over 40 of those, but there are a couple of duplicates. You can't get rid of the English United States one I'm found here. If I want to add any more voices, there's nothing left I want to, but if I wanted to add Arabic, for example, I just click on that, click add, and it would then download that to my computer, and then after closing settings and reopening, I would then have that voice added as well. But as I said earlier, you do have a problem with this, and that is those voices don't all appear when you first actually install them. And the problem is that there are two types of voices. Actually, there is officially three. The text-to-speech voices are the ones that start TTS in the, I'm in the registry, by the way, in the registry here, and there's just about 12 of those or so, I think, from memory. But there's a large number of additional voices that have been provided for use with accessibility and the not very well loved Cortana feature. And those are not automatically available to you. And now in order to get them to become available, you need to registry fix. And for that, I have provided with the application, if you download this, some registry files. And if I just drag this across here. Okay, I've got a whole load of different registry files then for each of these different languages, for example, Danish, and I've already done this here. But if I actually just open this here, you can see you've got the registry entries here in order to make that voice work with text-to-speech. That's one of the ones from the accessibility feature and so on there. So that's all explained how you do that in the help file that comes with the program. It's a PDF file, and going through that, then it tells you how to actually create registry entries for additional voices. And I won't go through that now. You can read that in your own time. Okay, so of the 109 languages then, the installed voices are 35 of them, okay, in 35 different languages. I've got more than 35 voices here. And each of those then, I've got the name of the voice that's been installed. You've already heard the UK English Hazel.
This is sample text spoken by Microsoft
Spanish.
Hazel in English. Este es un texto de muestra hablado por Microsoft Elena en español.
Chinese Simplified.
这是 Microsoft 会给用中文简体说的示
etc.
例文本。
Okay, and that's all of the 35 different voices. And there's some that surprised me that are included, as well as others that I thought would be included and aren't. Then there's ones for which an alternative voice has been suggested. Now, I've done this by looking up the derivation of Azerbaijani, for example, and finding out that it has roots that are connected, at least in part, with Turkish. Basque Spanish is more obvious, Belarusian, Russian, Corsican French and so on. You can probably see the reasons for this, and Esperanto as well. You can actually use Spanish for. They're reasonably accurate there, and so I can actually speak Basque in the Spanish voice there. Ones where there was no reasonable alternative, though, are the ones where I'm offering that you can use the default voice, which in my case is UK British, and Afrikaans, there is no sensible alternative. So I know this sounds nothing like Afrikaans.
Dit is voorbeeldtekst in Afrikaans wat de Engels, venig die Koninkrijk, in Engels gepraat
And
wordt.
similarly, Albanian is even worse.
Kys tekst symbol en chip I folenge Anglistia, bateria e bashkure,
Now,
any
if you
English.
decide that you don't like the use of the default voice with one of the ones that you want to do, you can just untick that there, or you can actually get rid of all of them by doing this here. And it seems I've actually got an error there, but I can actually take them off. And once I do that, then only the installed voices will actually have a voice actually in use, and there are 35 of those languages, which leaves 74 languages, 73 now it seems, right, which will not have one there. But if I turn this back on again, then okay, default voice then is another 25 languages, and then there's ones which have got a different character set and they've got no voice available. So you've got languages like Malayalam and so on, which is a lovely script, but you can't actually speak that here. Now, if you do add any voices, then you just basically, you can look at the list of voices. There's a report here, too small for you to read. And if I just increase the size of that, this is my default voice English here. These are all the other ones I've got installed. If I had installed an extra one there, I would just click on that and it adds that to the list and so on. I've got 41 installed there, but only 35 of those are actually usable. Okay, I think I have just about finished on this particular item there, except I mentioned Malayalam. Let me just go back to that language here. And if I just say something very brief and change it into Malayalam. And it would help if I actually clicked on that. You can see what I mean by it. It's got a very unusual script. It's a very pretty looking language, but it's certainly not one that actually is easily readable for somebody who's not used to that. And I think it's a unique language in terms of the script used there. I've also got a list of the scripts here. There are 28 different scripts used by these 109 different languages. And I've got a report which actually allows me to look at those different languages and the scripts that they use in each case. I'll pause at this point, and I haven't shown you any code as yet here, but does anyone have any questions before I go on to the second part of this session?
Is it all right, Colin, if I put a link to your website where you can download this?
Certainly, although that's going to be my last slide on the
Okay.
PowerPoint anyway.
But it's nice to have it in chat, so.
Yeah, sure. Mandarin was mentioned too. Yeah, Mandarin's not available as a language that you can actually use in here, I'm afraid. Afrikaans Dutch, I don't know. There's a possibility. I hadn't thought of that one, Adrian, there. Any questions?
The idea is that Afrikaans is from the Dutch settlers.
Yep. My knowledge of history was obviously poor when I did this because I had forgotten that. I should have known that for obvious reasons. Okay, I'll look into that one and see how well that would work. No questions at the moment. In that case, let me just show you some of the code. This is available, by the way, for free as an ACCDE file. If you want the source code, you can then get that by purchasing it at a fairly low price here. And for some reason, that hasn't loaded the Visual Basic Editor. Now it has on the other screen. Crystal, is that large enough for you?
Yes, thank you.
That's all right. Right. Okay. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time showing this, but basically then I will talk about how I do the translation when I use the other application afterwards here. But we've got the main module then, module translate there. I've got two different translate functions here. The first one just called Translate. You just basically tell it to what to actually set up in Google Translate. You then grab the translation from the web page with this code here. You then collect that, and then I process it slightly to take out any characters that will cause me problems, and then return that in the other window in the if you like, the dual window form there. That works well for going to and from any character set, going to any character set from English or whatever. But if you start with a non-Latin character set and try and translate from that into another character set, it fails. This one, however, does work to and from any of the character sets. It's called TranslateXL because it uses a hidden instance of Excel to actually do its work. And again, we actually tell it to send a query to the web page for Google. We process the URL so that it can be read within Excel. Then we grab the string that's translated, take out the portion that actually we want from that, and again process that to get the actual speech, the actual text there. The speech part is incredibly simple. And I know David, who is not an, if you like, an advanced coder in his own words here, he actually has got text-to-speech all over his application there, and he's found that he can actually use this very well here. So we've got procedure here to check which voices are available, and we've got one here to test the voices and update the voices here. But in terms of actually speaking them, then let me just go to my form translate and speak to will do just as well as the other one there. So we find some text there, and then once we've got the text, all we do is we tell it to actually set up a voice, having told it which voice to actually use there. Okay, and we select that from the list of available voices, and then we just literally read the text at whatever rate. Remember, I changed the speed of it. We tell it to do, and I've got some extra code here to allow me to stop the thing through, but basically it's just one line. Speak in the chosen voice, the message, that's the bit of text in that window, okay, and do it once, okay? And that's it. That's all there is to it. So that's all the code I think is necessary for now. Much more information in the PDF file that comes with this. So as I say, this is available free if you just want to use it, but you won't see the code if you do that.
Colin, do you need a reference to do that kind of thing?
No, though, hang on, sorry. Yes, God, yes, I do. What am I talking about? You need one reference. And thank you for reminding me of that vital point. You need to add the Microsoft Speech Object Library. Now, really confusingly, there are two of them. The one that I've chosen is the older one, which is in the Speech Common sappy.dll file here. The one you do not want is the other one, also called Speech Object Library, which is the Speech One Core Library, and that is the one that is used for the narrator function and so on for accessibility. And that has different coding. I find it more difficult to use, and I think both David and Alessandro use the same library as I do here. Thank you, Maria. Yes, that's the only reference you need, though. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'm going to come out of this. Go back to my PowerPoint and hopefully get to the next slide and onto the Access Application Translator, which I started about 18 months ago when I did the Translate to Speak application and nearly finished it and then left it. And it will be ready within about 2 weeks' time. It's 95% done. So the idea of this then is to modify applications for clients whose native language is different to your own. And you can translate all form and report captions, but also control text to any other of the supported languages. In addition, you can translate message boxes, input boxes, and status bar text, and also, if you wish to, things like combo box lists and so on. I will show you that shortly. As before, to and from any of the supported languages. And I made a conscious decision not to change the names of any objects such as tables, forms, or their field names, and not to translate the data. You could translate the data if you want to, but it's not actually built into this program. So the main form looks almost identical to the previous one because it was developed straight afterwards. The only difference is you've got some extra buttons, which I will show you shortly, and that's the same form in German. And notice German is a more verbose language, and it's taking up more space in each of those labels there, but also if you look at the length of some of these captions on the buttons here. For that reason, I deliberately make the size of this label, the size of the buttons wider than I need them to be in English, because I know certain languages will require more space, and I want it to show fully if possible there. The second form on this then is where the work is done, and you select a language. Really help if I showed you the picture first here. I've already translated this one into Greek, and so you select all of the items you actually want to translate. This is a list of all the forms and reports in the demo database there, and then you tell it which language to translate it to, e.g. Greek. And you can see here my combo box has now got the translated version, the Greek version language, as well as the English one. So I've got a bilingual feature built into this. And as you do the translation, as you will see shortly, you get a progress indicator. As mentioned then, this is the main form, very similar to before. And again, it tells you something about the program here, and it tells you some important things. Before you do any translation work, it is a very good idea to back up the database. It takes only a couple of seconds in this particular case, and it will back up the host database if it's used as an add-in. I've got three simple message box, input box, and status bar text here down the bottom there, all in English at the moment. I'm showing you that because after I do some translation, they will become bilingual. So let's translate this to Norwegian. Tells you what it's doing in both English and Norwegian. And now, as before, I've got the opportunity to save that. Now I've got a bilingual message here. Do I want to save it in Norwegian for future use? If not, I'll reopen in English next time. And if I wanted to, I can also save it in Norwegian. If I'd said no now, I can save it in Norwegian by clicking that button later on. I'm going to say no for now. But if I now click on this, I've got my bilingual message box, Norwegian at the top, English at the bottom, my bilingual input box, and my bilingual status bar text, Norwegian on the left, English on the right there. Now that's not particularly impressive necessarily for doing into another Latin language here, but if I translate that to Malayalam, my favorite language that I can't actually do anything with, got an extra problem here. Malayalam, the script is much larger. I don't know if you noticed that it shrank down after a while. If I've reduced the font size by 2 points on every single caption anywhere on here. Otherwise, it would be far too large for use here. So I'm not going to save it in that. But if I go to here now, my formatted message box can read non-Latin character sets without changing the locale and without changing my keyboard settings. An ordinary message box would show a load of squiggle, as I will show you later. Input box, same issue there. Ordinary input box wouldn't work. It does with my special Unicode input box that I added to my website a couple of days ago. And my status bar text, again, down the bottom, Malayalam and English here. Let's change, well, I don't really need to change this back to English because if I go to the second form, my translate objects, and then close that and go back, it's in English again here. So let's now go to this. And you may have seen a box where I could tick so I could go straight to this form if I wish to in future then. So can somebody give me an idea of a language they would like me to translate these objects into? Your choice.
Well, you didn't do Swedish before, and we do have Lennart here, so.
Right. Your wish is my command. I will select all of them. This will take about 1.5 minutes if things don't go wrong. And it's just saying, are you sure you want to do that in both English and Swedish? Yes, I am. And so you get a progress indicator telling you how many controls there are that it needed to change for that first item there, not too many. And it opens I did a change to this the other day, which caused it to open the VB editor. I'm just going to drag that to the other screen. Otherwise, it will actually cause problems. It's now done 3 of these. Moving on from here. And some are quicker than others because they've got more controls and control tip text and message boxes and so on to change here. And I'll show you in a second some of these here. Maybe I should have just done some of these. I could stop this, but the ones I particularly want to do haven't yet actually been done here.
Suggestion,
Yeah.
Colin. I like that you have the progress bar on each form, but I would also love to see like
An overall program.
translating form 1 of 15 or whatever.
Yep, that was actually on there at one stage and it got taken out and I forgot to put it back in again. So
Okay.
it will be there, and I was actually going to put an overall progress bar, but yeah, I'll put that one back in. I agree with you totally there. I was just going to say the reason why I've got so many objects in here, I've got examples of the first 3, same data, a continuous form with the C at the end, data sheet form, a single record form, another data sheet, another single form. I've got a split form and so on. So I've deliberately chosen a range of different forms. It also works with the navigation form, but I haven't actually done that on here. Right, it's done all 15 of them. That took 105 seconds. And would I like to view these now? Well, I will say yes, and it would just open each of those in turn. And one of those, which I meant to show you before, actually is a version of the contacts report, which has got no data in. And so it's got a message saying there is no data for this report, and it's saying it in Swedish, of course. And now if we just go through, then this will be reasonably accurate. It won't be perfect. The idea is that you should then get somebody who's a native speaker to check each of these.
It looks like very nice in Swedish.
Well, I'm glad to say that. I mean, some languages will be better than others. It tends to be that Google Translate works well from any of the Latin character set languages into any of the other ones. It begins to work less well for other character sets here. Okay, let's close that one. That was my split form there. This one, I'm actually going to show you these buttons in a second. So I'm just going to minimize that one. A data sheet form, one with a input box on here, or an input box on here, translated into Swedish, a helper form that I'm going to use later, and so on and so on. And you notice then none of the data has been changed quite deliberately then. So as you can see then it works for all of the different types of form, and that's back to my main translate form here. Let me just now find the one I seem to have actually closed it rather than minimizing it. Right, this form here, my contacts form then has got 5 buttons on this. Now I meant to show you this when it was still in English here, and maybe I should just translate that one back into English. And this may seem a strange way of doing it, but to get around the problem of changing from one language to another, if you want to go back to your original language, at the moment it's done like that. 13 seconds there. Do I want to view it now? Yes, I do. Right, so an example message box. UK data obtained from, and that website there. Formatted version of the same thing. Input box, and if I click on here, of course, it will go to that record. My Unicode input box, slightly different layouts there, does the same idea though. And then my helper form version of the same thing, where I can go to whichever one I want. Oh, I thought it could. No, I don't know what happened there. Right, okay, so all of those work for a Latin character set. If I now change these 2, I could have done it in Swedish there. I'm going to change this one and that helper form then from English into Arabic will do. Oops, sorry. Just those 2. And this should take about 30 seconds or so. Okay, my bilingual message. Yes, I do want to view them. So remember, this is a right to left language here. I'm going to close that. I'm going to be using it later on, and I'm going to minimize this as well. So let me just show you these different things then. Remember, this was a standard message box. And that's what happens. With using a UK British keyboard and using my locale, then it cannot read that, apart from the bit that I haven't translated there. Absolutely useless. Whereas the formatted message box can handle that perfectly well. And that uses the eval function, by the way. It's a very old message box function that I got years ago from the Trigeminal website, which no longer exists. Input box, same problem. Can't handle a non-Latin character set. But the Unicode input box that I created the other day will work perfectly well. Go to record 21, and here's my own one here. And last time I did this, for some reason it didn't work, and it doesn't seem to be working. I seem to have messed up that, but it was working yesterday. It had to be something went wrong. So you can see the point of this. Then I'm saying, if you want to have translation to non-Latin character sets, do not use a standard message box or a standard input box on your forms. Use one of these ones here. And if I just close that and just open any one of these objects here, let me just show you the contacts form in Swedish here, and I've also got status bar text down here as well. Let me just show you some of the code. The one with the 5 buttons on will be quite useful to do. Let's start with something simpler. So the contacts form then are translated into Swedish. When it goes through and does the code for this, it actually will put a line here telling you what the language is currently for that form. And then it will use that in whatever translated text that you've got. So the text that was on the status bar then just said contacts form, okay, but it said it in that language, which is Swedish. Similarly, got this one here, it will say, again, something in the status bar. Very easy, very quick to set up, and easily then change to another language there. For the postcode addresses one then, which is in Arabic at the moment, then we've got the formatted message box, which uses the text here. Okay, translates each part of that separately. We've got the input box, similar idea with an ordinary input box, again translating this text using the Excel version of my translate function, and the ordinary message box, which doesn't work here. Right now, the two functions that I've got here, if I can find out where I've got them, the formatted message box, there it goes. Okay, as I say, from the Trigeminal website, it's also on my website, you can download it from, and that basically wraps the message box function in the eval function, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, that not only creates bold text for the first line, but it also allows it to actually read non-Latin character sets. Similarly, and this is the one that I literally created the other day, I've done something very similar with the input box, wrapped it in the eval function. It doesn't make the first line bold, but it does allow it to read Unicode character sets, which as far as I'm concerned, that's what I needed it to do. So we've got that. The translate function is almost identical to what it was on the other application. I've got a couple of other bits of important code here. When I'm translating text, things like last name and first name, if that's just one word with no space, they won't be translatable. So I add spaces between things that I want to have translatable. So for example, BBC News, all one word there, will be split. Okay, contact ID would be split like that, last name, and so on. That will allow more translation to work successfully. It won't, of course, work with untranslatable things like abbreviations. I've then got some code which will allow me to, make message bilingual. I'm working on that at the moment. I've got code which allows me to populate the object control info, the control tips and the captions into a table like this. And if we just scroll on down through here, let's go to number 9. So I know that's got some control tips as well. And you can see then each of the languages that I translate to, it then saves that in that new language, both the control caption and also any control tips there are. So it does that for each of the languages as we go through. But initially, what this does is it then collects all the captions in the default language, which in my case is English, of course. Second one for the translated version. And then I've got some code to find particular text like message boxes and so on, and then to replace that with other text. So I've got code to find text, code to replace it, and also code to remove particular code lines as well. And I think I have covered just about all I want to do. I've got a couple of questions for you to actually ask. The things I haven't yet done with this is, sorry, that wasn't what I meant to do, design view. In some of tables, I've actually got descriptions, and not in all the tables by any means. I don't normally use them, but I use them here to see what would happen. If you have a form based on a table, when you click on a control, a bound control, it will then show you that object description in the status bar there. Whether or not it's worth me actually adding code to translate that as well is something I'm not sure about, because I don't know how many people use them there. And the second thing to say is, although this is a standalone app at the moment, my aim is to make this into an add-in so that you don't have to import all of the items into each of your applications. But we will see how that goes on. That's the last stage I've got to do there. And I've got a couple more slides to mention there. I know I've rushed through this, but is there any questions while I've still got this particular application open?
Colin, I was, is there any reason, you talked, what you just said there about including staff or having the add-in, is there any reason you can't take a database, one of the user's databases, do the translation as a one-off, and then leave them with the translated database without any need for the ability to continue translating?
That the idea is, if I was selling a particular application to somebody who wanted it in German or whatever, then I could do the translation of their app, okay, and send it to them translated. They wouldn't need any of this stuff. But if I was a developer wanting to translate my programs into Italian, Swedish, Malayalam or whatever, then the ability to do this multiple times might be useful. Okay, so it depends on the purpose. Individual developers will probably, other than playing with it, not need to do multiple translations, but they might need to translate it into Vietnamese once and once only. So you've got the ability to do it.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure that quite answers the question. What I'm talking about
probably didn't understand it.
Is for a developer who has your package, why would they not want to produce a database in, say, Vietnamese for one client, and then have another client with the same database in Italian?
Sorry, I think, I thought I did answer that question. What I'm saying is, yes, they can do that. Okay, the idea is you would then just distribute it in that language for that particular client. There is no reason for the ability to do ongoing translation to be made available to the client. They just need the translated version. So the developer would have the ability to do this either as an add-in or by importing the forms here and the code into the database to be translated. Am I making sense or not?
Not a great deal, but I'll take it offline.
Okay, basically, I think we're saying the same thing. You're probably saying it more clearly than me. All right, there is no reason why anyone would need to keep translating items in general as an end user. So they wouldn't need to see any of this stuff here. Okay. Any other questions from the chat, Maria?
I had a question.
Yep. Who's that?
Is any of your translation data driven, where it's storing the translation in a table and then reading it from the table?
Yes, that was what I just showed you with the captions and so on. All of the
so that's just the captions?
Right, all of the captions, all of the control tips are stored in a table. I'm still deciding whether to store message boxes and so on in a table rather than translating them on the fly. At the moment, remember, I said I'm not translating data. Now, if I wanted to translate data, then I would actually put that into a table in the same way as I'm doing here. Things like this combo box here, I'm just literally translating that on the fly for each language as I do them there. So you could have data stored in a table as well. I'm choosing not to do that.
Okay.
Right. Some caveats, things you obviously need to consider if you're going to use this. It's quick. It's very fast. But you should always translate, as I've mentioned already, from the default form or report language, which might be English. You might be starting off in Norwegian or whatever, but translate from that each time, one where the language was definitely perfect. Remember, some languages are more verbose than others, and others, like Chinese, are much more concise. Make sure you allow sufficient width for captions. If you don't do that, then you will need to do some adjustment after translation for certain languages. There also is the issue where certain non-Latin script languages have got larger fonts. The 7 of them I found, Greek is a little bit larger, Malayalam is significantly larger. I would recommend reducing the font size if you're doing those. I've mentioned already about adding spaces to change captions such as last name one word to last name with a space so it can be translated, but abbreviations and specialized text may not be translatable. I've already mentioned that accuracy is usually better for European and other Latin script languages. But whatever language you translate it into, don't rely on Google Translate to be perfect. It isn't. Make sure you get a native speaker to check it before it's distributed to end users, or at least send it to your client and say, please will you check this before you use it with all your staff there. So where can you get this? Well, the 2 apps then. Translator to Speak app has been available for a year or so. You can get it from this page on my website. It then also goes into the detail about how it works. The ACCDE version, both 32 and 64-bit, are free, and one with source code so you can import it into your own databases and use it in any non-commercial database is £50. And there is a video about this, which I created on my YouTube channel. There's a link to that on that web page anyway. The other app, Application Translator, will be available probably as an add-in. If not, it will be a standalone. And that's the web page for that. I created the web page the other day, but it's not, as I say, quite ready. So it'll be either an ACCDB or an ACCDA file with source code. Now, I don't think I mentioned this earlier. You cannot translate any ACCDE objects because you need to go into design view in order to do the changes, and that's not possible in a compiled file. For the same reason, my application translator app itself will be with source code, because otherwise you will not be able to translate those forms there. And there is a very short video of an early version of this, which I'm going to actually expand upon in the next week or so. And that, I think I'm done. I hope I didn't rush that too much.
So I'm not sure that you need to translate the translator forms, Colin.
The reason why is that if I'm offering this to people, a lot of my customers, for whatever reason, seem to be actually in non-English speaking locations. So if somebody is a customer of mine and they actually want to use this program and they are, let's say, Polish, then the ability to have the original forms in Polish will probably be helpful for them. And so my feeling is it's useful to do that. It wouldn't make it that much harder, I suppose, if they could speak English as well. And then it could be an ACCDE file, I know.
But would it have to be an ACCDB in order to do that?
If I missed out the ability to translate the forms used by the app, then no, let me just stop sharing. Then it wouldn't need to be an ACCDB file there. But my feeling at the moment is I'm going to do that. It's going to be a commercial app anyway. There won't be a free version of this. And therefore, to my mind, I might as well make the full functionality available.
Okay.
Colin, I've built something like this. And
hello, Ben.
Hello. I have a customer in Japan, and so I had to convert the application to Japanese, and the client said, we want really to be in English. but I know the users didn't quite agree with the management. And so one of the options I put in there was any message box. I had my own message box form that was a little fancier, and I added a button there. So any message box that came up, they could click the button and it would just take whatever text was in that message box and just convert it to Japanese.
You're using your own specialized form, a bit like I was with that helper input form. And that's something else I'm considering as at the last stage, whether to do that as well, rather than actually translating each item on the fly with the standard message box. I think both solutions will work. I can certainly see the benefits of doing it your way there. And by the way, can I just thank you for your improvements to the input box, the masked input box. It was that triggered me to actually look at doing a Unicode input box as well, straight after that. So not that I use them very often, but some people do.
I think the cool concept of that thing you're referring to is that it just overrides the existing message box. You don't even have to make a different call.
No, I've realized that, and I'd forgotten how that works, and that will work with, I could change the name of the formatted message box and my Unicode input box to be input box and a message box, and they will take the place of the default. So I might merge the functionality of your version of the masked input box and my Unicode one into one input box, and then just call it the obvious name, input box.
Right.
Right. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think it would be neat to show that to these people here in this group. Just the what is it called? VBA dot something that you put in front of the message box.
Sorry.
You just put two. I think there's two words you put in front of the standard message box call, and then you can override it.
VBA dot interaction.
Yeah.
You don't need them. You can miss them.
Oh, you don't?
Out. No.
Okay.
It works.
So
perfectly.
it'll still override even without that. It
yes.
doesn't recursively call itself.
No, I tested that with the one I actually did there. No, you don't need them. At least not in the test that I did there.
Colin, Colin and Ben, I should say, while you're talking about this, would it be helpful to illustrate exactly what you're talking about? Because I suspect for most of us here, while you're talking about that, we don't know exactly what you're referring to.
Yes. So while he's pulling it up, I'm assuming that's what he's doing with his blank.
I'm trying to, yeah.
The input box form doesn't have a password mask, and I wanted to have just a simple password call, and I didn't want to build a form for it. I wanted to use the input box, and I found out that somebody had found some API calls to override the input box once it opens and change the font to be the asterisk. So when you're typing a password in, you'll just see the star, star, star like you're expecting on a password. So what I wanted to do was make a input box function, but I didn't want to have to make a new function. I still wanted the original input box to be called and just have an optional parameter at the end as whether or not it should use a password font. So the gist of this conversation is you can use input box, just that word, as your own function name, and it'll intercept your calls to the normal input box. And same goes for message box. If you make your own function, you call it message box. Instead of calling it message box 2 or message box plus, just call it message box.
So if you have
any calls to it will get intercepted.
So just by the pure fact of having a publicly available, public function in your project that's got the same name as either input box or message box, that will override the input box and message box. Thank you, Ben. I think that's what I wanted everyone to have an understanding of. So when you do your input box, which allows for the asterisks, you use operating system available code.
Yeah, API calls.
Yeah.
And I didn't figure this out. I just found it in a forum where people had tested it and made sure it was 64-bit compatible. But I had already had a message box function that if you didn't provide the title bar for the message box, the whole purpose of this function was just to take your application name and put it in the title of the message box as a default, which is kind of a nice touch if you don't have a lot of detail in your message box calls.
Sure.
And then I thought I would just add that to this input box
Yeah, I've got the original masked input box page on my website on the screen here now. And
Sure.
with the standard input box, if you type a password in, it shows, which is useless. So
Yes.
Daniel Clan, back in 2003, set up the masked input box with API calls, and Ben's added to that. Ben, if you could post in the chat the thread at Access World Forums that you added that code to, because I haven't yet put it on my website there. And if I can also, while I'm here, say on my website, then I've got my Unicode input box and the code for that with the eval function, which you can get to. And I've also got the formatted message box here. Okay, I am bold, then I become normal, etc.
But I'm particularly interested in the one that's called input box, because the concept of essentially replacing the default with your own version.
Let me see if I can demonstrate that quickly. If I've
Well, I
got
think
time.
Ben explained it well. I know we're running short.
I've got it here in my hands, so I can post it in the chat. This is the message box version of it.
Right. Let me just show you here. If I can find where I've got this. Mod functions here. Right. So we've got the Unicode input box. Somewhere or other, I have got some code to test this, I thought. Let's put it in the immediate window.
And I also posted into the chat the link where I posted it on Access World Forums.
Thanks for that. I'll nick that before we finish.
Yeah. So
look later.
What I was saying there, and it's going to take me too long to change this now. If you just literally change the test input box, that will do me. So here we've got a test input function here. So if I run this, it's first of all going to do it as an ordinary input box and then as the Unicode one. Okay, it's changing it to whatever language that is. And now I'll do it as the Unicode one. Okay, again, I don't know what language it is. It doesn't really matter. Now, if I remember the layout was different here. If I go to my Unicode input box and I change the name of that to input box, and now I run that first one, it should now load. It would do if I changed all the code. Hopefully that's all the instances. Well, I don't need to change that. It's not going to error, he says, hopefully. Right, this is Korean it's changing it to, by the way, as you all knew. There you go. Right, so I've changed the name of it to input box and it's loading my version of the input box function, overriding the standard access one. And it works with the message box as well. So you can change any of the default functions within Access into your own one if you wish to do so. Just name them exactly the same. And you do not need the VBA.interaction dot that you put at the beginning of it, Ben. It works with it, but you don't need it.
Okay.
But thank you for that.
Fascinating. And we can talk some more here, but before, since we are at the hour marker, I just want to mention I have the last Tuesday in February open. If anyone is interested in presenting, please contact me. I don't think I'll be able to prep anything because I'm going to be talking March 1st at Colin's meeting. So I'm still working on my finishing touches on that.
Thank you, Maria. I'll be happy to show Loop and Link CSV. I'm Crystal, Strive for Peace. First, you browse to a folder and indicate if you want subfolders to be read as well. Then all the CSV files are linked using queries, since queries are easier than tables to programmatically get to. When queries are named, spaces and other unwanted characters are removed. Also, if the text file is stored as UTF, the beginning characters are removed since they could muck up your data. A table is used to keep track of what came in and when, and then the linked data goes to where it needs to be. Finally, a chart is created to visualize the data. That's Tuesday at 12 noon Central Time or 6 p.m. for the UK. On Wednesday, March 1st, Maria is presenting to Access Europe about optimizing queries in SQL Server. She'll demonstrate various built-in tools. On Thursday is Access Pacific with Pat Hartman, who will show how to avoid bad data by validating it as it's entered using a form before update event. Lots of exciting stuff for Access coming up. Join us.
Thank you in advance for that, Maria. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Just last, I've just noticed lots of comments about the spelling of the word swap. I know Americans only spell it with an A. In English, in proper English, it can be with an O or an A, depending on its context.
Good to know.
I wasn't aware of context. Crystal shouted out that it's apparently a correct spelling is OP is a correct spelling, but I've never come across that myself.
Yeah. Well, OP, that's the standard spelling. It's the standard spelling as far as I'm concerned. Otherwise, I wouldn't have used
Only
it.
in the UK, though.
Yeah,
No, not even in the UK, Crystal.
Oh,
Never heard it in the
I've
UK.
never run across it.
Never a no.
No.
I agree with Adrian.
Right. Okay.
I would like to suggest that Ben does a presentation with his developer tips. Now, he did it a couple of years ago for another group, but it's a great presentation. Really phenomenal.
Would love to have you if you're willing, Ben.
You're going to suggest somebody else, Crystal.
Yes.
That's very generous of you.
Look, I've been trying to get Ben to do Access Europe for ages without success, so you can't swipe him before I do.
I don't even know what meeting I'm in. It was on my calendar. It's
not
Access
Right.
Europe.
Lunchtime.
It's
Access Europe is tomorrow.
tomorrow you want to come to. And then it's Access Pacific the next day. It's a bit of a sort of crush at the moment with this here. As always, this meeting's gone completely off topic.
Yeah.
Swap. I've done two demonstrations of that Translate and Speak before, and nobody has mentioned that. Anyway.
It's interesting, Colin. Actually, it's because essentially you're vindicated that technically it is it's an acceptable spelling. I've never come across it before myself.
Right. I that is the spelling I have used all of my short life.
Gracious. So how much of that, is there any part of that sentence that you're not lying?
Yeah, it's old English, as we well know. Is there anything else in the chat that I should have been aware of that I need to answer?
We did have several posts here. Peter Cole did a few and Ben did some, about the different issues with the input box and that kind of stuff. The explanation of why the normal message box does not work with Unicode, all related to that topic.
I don't actually know why adding the eval wrapper makes it work in both the message box and the input box. I have no idea. It just works. I can't find any documentation of it at all. But Peter, are you saying there that you've got an explanation there in the nkadesign.com link?
That's an explanation of why the Unicode doesn't work with the standard message box. Yeah, it's a little bit involved, and it's because of the way that strings are handled within the API calls.
Right.
So
I mean, I think, you see, with that is what I'm more interested in. No offense, so thank you for the link, is why it does work if you put the eval function. I cannot make any sense of that at all.
I've no idea as yet. I'll have to look into that.
I am wondering if the eval is not typed.
No, I don't think it's that, Maria.
Variant.
I think what's happening is, and I might be wrong here, but what I would guess is that when you use eval, you're actually working with the expression service rather than with VBA functionality. So instead of going to the VBA available input box function, yeah, you're going to the expression service input, because you know with in SQL, in queries, there are certain functions that are available because that all gets processed by the expression service, and people have postulated before with things like the if function or expression, I should say, that it behaves differently. Sometimes things behave differently because the version that's available to the expression service is different from that which is available within VBA itself. So I would suggest that might be the reason.
Yeah, thinking about it, Eval is probably sorting out things into actual Unicode because VBA is working in ASCII, and when you're calling the input box, message box, it actually uses the ASCII version of the API call. So Eval is presumably sorting that out for us. Very useful.
It works within Unicode.
Yeah. And I mean, for years I used it just to make bold text. It's pure chance that I found out that it was actually useful for this purpose as well. There is one more thing I should mention with the Unicode message box, input box, and if I can find the web page and load it, it'll probably be quicker. And that is, you may have noticed that with the Unicode input box, not only does it move the two buttons here down to the bottom, I don't think many people use the help button there. It doesn't work with the help button. It adds this question mark, and if you click on that, you go to a Microsoft help page, which is for Office 365, and I cannot find any way of removing that question mark. I don't know what makes it happen, but it does. So it's there, and I can't do anything about it.
Let me just say thanks very much, Colin. I know Maria's already thanked you. That was really very impressive. Cheers.
Agree.
I've got a question before you close those tabs.
Yeah, Ben.
The Cypress Lookout. That's where I got the dialog box I'm using for my message box replacement.
The enhanced message box.
Yes, the enhanced message box is very cool. Give you some extra buttons. But my question is, does anybody know this guy? Because he kind of fell off the face of the earth.
He stopped developing in Access. I've been trying to find somebody, I presume Richard is from France. I've been trying to find a French developer to speak at Access Europe, and without success. He was my obvious choice, and he's no longer developing in Access. I've not managed to get hold of him, is the other thing.
Yeah, I posted some updates on his website, and he never responded.
No.
So,
no.
It's been years.
I mean, there's things I like about his enhanced message box, for example, the colors and so on, but I wish he would actually allow you to do things like change the font size and so on. So I don't use his enhanced message box, although some people love it. I prefer to make my own customized message boxes instead. A bit like you're saying with that you do as well.
You could change the text height in his box quite easily if you needed to, because it's all just VBA code.
Yeah, maybe you could. I didn't look into it. I just wanted that to be instantly available. I wanted instant gratification.
I know you can change it because I themed it, but we never got to actually put it up on his site.
Maria, would you like me to send you a PDF version of the PowerPoint presentation for uploading to the website, the org website?
Yes, that would be awesome.
Okay, I'll do that straight off this meeting.
Yep, and that will be available under Files, and then when Crystal, thank you, Crystal, produces the video, we'll also have a link to the PowerPoint under that.
But once you're a subscriber, you will get, for most of the meetings, an email. Maria sends them, I do, George sends them. I'm not sure about the other groups. And then you can actually then add that to the calendar as a recurring event. But it's not easy, is it?
Let me send this or put this link in the chat, and hopefully you can open it from there.
So do they give you an ICS file or ICA?
Yeah, it's a link to an ICS file here.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
It's clunky. It's not as simple as it should be.
There we go. Try that. Zoom creates it. You have to open Outlook first. Well, I always have Outlook open, George.
Whoever closes Outlook.
That's
Hello.
good advice.
Hello, George. I didn't realize you were here as well.
I just got here because I just opened Outlook.
Right. Okay.
So a reminder came up saying, there's a meeting an hour ago.
An hour ago, yeah.
Did that work?
It ran long.
Thanks for coming for the whole meeting, George.
Sure.
Speak up if you want to keep chatting here.
I appreciate it.
I've just looked it up.
Oh, standard web offset printing.
Yeah, there is that one as well.
All right,
there.
we're going to end before we go.
Yeah. Anyway,
downhill
there's no one here from Australia, so you shouldn't know about that anyway, Crystal. Right.
Is it
All
the
right.
stomach one?
Bye, all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.